Hi, it's Deborah Carter here from Preparation Tech. Preparation Tech is the interview series whereby we showcase the personal stories of a diverse and inclusive group of students, tradespeople, and professionals whose work intersects with technology. The purpose is really to help guide parents, caregivers, teachers, and school guidance counselors on helping kids engage with technology and marry technology with their interests and passions. Today, I'm talking with Shaquille Veldoom, who is a self-taught 3D designer. And I heard about Shaquille from a well-known industrial designer who said, Deborah, you have to speak with this guy because he is so good at what he does and he's completely self-taught. So here we are. Shaquille, welcome. Tell us what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I'm a 3D designer, and I basically, since a young age, I've had just a great hobby of making my own cars and just looking at the world through my own lens a bit and trying to come up with my own version of it. So through that, I've just been capable of just focusing my energy on that since I was like 8 or 9 years old. And now I just got to a point where I kind of start to do it a little bit more professionally and take care of it in, yeah, in just a more mature way, and I think. So that is, yeah, kind of who I am and what I do.
Great, great. And you talk about being into 3D design since you were young, like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
So basically, I started to draw at a young age. I just had a pen and a paper, and I was just trying to make my own cars and just try to do, just young boy stuff. But I was fortunate to have a dad who was like an electrical engineer and a safety specialist and stuff. So he was kind of seeing what the next wave would probably be with this design stuff that I was trying to get into. So he just handed me a computer with Google SketchUp on it. And instead of just drawing on pen and paper, within kind of roughly the same time, I had now a 3D visual of something that I could actually rotate around to see how it would operate. So that was just a trigger for me to kind of go way deeper in that direction at a very young age. And I just started to make everything that I could imagine, So I just did everything that the software had the opportunity to be done in it. So I just started kind of to find my way in it. And shortly but slowly, I started to grow my skill and I could expand what I was capable of building. And just on my whole thought process kind of changed and morphed into the way that these software systems work, because now the only limitations is what is capable in that software system. So I just started to try to reach for the limits, and I was studying the extremes. That is one of my mantras, like kind of find out what the ultimate limits are for something and kind of find a way to utilize those things in a way that is pushing things forward, because that is what technology is, So that was kind of the trigger for me. So yeah.
Great, great. What are some of the projects that you're working on now?
So I'm currently involved with Michelle for the food containers. I'm doing animation work for people to kind of make like a Phoenix 3D animation that is catching on fire and turning into ash. I'm doing like Marvel comics things that also 3D print statues. I've been working with artists to kind of 3D scan their statues that they've been making, and also 3D print miniature versions of it. I've done like aftermarket car design stuff, just a bunch of different stuff that is just very varied. And I think that is also very like fun for me, because I never do the same thing every day. I just every day of the week is something different, and that is it's just ever evolving. And I think that is also something that keeps it entertaining for me as well.
Yeah. You talked about also getting into video games, to gaming. What are you doing in
Yes.
that area?
So basically, over the whole period with COVID, I kind of had a change of mind. So before, I was kind of get more into engineering, and I just started to see, because I'm self-taught, it would be very difficult for a company to actually hire me on as like one of their engineers or designers or something, because they have to be able to verify that I'm actually capable of designing something and guarantee its safety if it is actually also being put out to the market. So I just started to kind of change up the market and the industry that I was going to focus in. So instead of trying to make something for real, I just thought that it might be better for me to become more of like a storyteller, and to kind of use my products as a way to make like a virtual world that people can interact with the things that I design with. And that was kind of the solution that I had, to make it in a game world and to use the Unreal Engine as a a development tool that I could make a character in, to walk around the house that I designed, to step into the car that I made, and to have people have that virtual experience instead of it being an authentic one, but kind of still maybe even get, some of those experiences to where I could maybe then, after the game has been successful, do make those cars for real. So that is kind of a utility for me to kind of step from one point to another, but then this is kind of the first step that I could do now, instead of finding $100 million to start a car company. So that is a little bit different. So yeah, that is kind of why I kind of started to go more into the storytelling and kind of figuring out a way to use my creativity and my ability to just give my imagination like a form, but then do it in a virtual way.
So I'm talking to you, I'm talking to this person who's obviously crazy about 3D design, video game design. Tell us where you came from. Take us back to your childhood. What kind of kid were you? You talked about your dad seeing that you loved to draw. He gave you a computer. You started with Google SketchUp. How did you evolve your skills?
So I grew up in the southeast of Amsterdam, and yeah, as we talked about, it's like a low-income neighborhood where a lot of people migrated from different parts of the world. And one of the things that I was fortunate with was that I had both of my parents in our household, and it is something that is kind of more rare in the environment that I'm from. So I also had an older sister, so she did go through like the elementary schools here in my community, which are a little bit like there for worse reputation than schools outside of the district. So when she's 4 years older than me, 3.5 years older than me. So when she kind of went to her fourth grade in elementary school, I started in my first one. So she then transferred to a school outside of the district, and my parents kind of skipped that whole elementary system here in the southeast of Amsterdam for me, and I just went outside of the district. So I had a little bit of a different experience than people had in my neighborhood here. So I
What
also
was
did,
the experience? Sorry, excuse me. Tell
you
us
know,
what was different about the school you went to versus the schools in your neighborhood?
well, it's hard for me to say because I didn't go through these schools, so I don't know what the other experience was that people had. But I was like in a class with just three other black kids, and we would, it's you kind of be put in a world where you don't really belong, but at the same time you do have a little bit more resources. So we would go to museums and zoos, and we would just be exposed to a lot. Like I've been through a lot of museums that are here in Amsterdam and also in the surrounding regions, just as a young kid. And even though at the time I wasn't really the kid that was like, yeah, we're going to a museum or something. Didn't really excite me back in the day, but when I went there, I did look at stuff and became like, oh, I could do maybe that to a house of mine that I was designing or no. So I was getting these triggers. And over time, as I matured, I kind of started to open expand my folders a little bit and kind of see what this world does have to offer to me. And then having that background as a kid to where I know all about these things that are in the city to go and reference, I can now go and revisit those things. So is something that I had been doing when I was in my later teenage years. But as a kid, like I think my parents like they had a hard time with me. It was a little bit rebellious because I didn't think that school was the most efficient way for me to learn as I was growing up. Because if I just thought about like the 8 hours I just spent in school and the amount of stuff that I would learn in a day, then I would just figure that if I would be home behind my computer on YouTube, like watching tutorials about how to design these cars and just learning about like National Geographic mega factories that they would showcase how a Aventador was put together, these Lamborghinis and stuff, and that stuff would just blow my mind on a daily basis. And that was the kind of stuff that I was into instead of being taught French or something. So that is kind of the upset that my parents have with me because I think they saw that I had a lot of potential to be like a successful had a successful school career, but I didn't really put a lot of my effort and my energy towards that because I had like a different purpose to myself at least. But so that was a little bit, it was challenging for them for sure, and I don't really know what I put them through. But yeah, I think they can look at it now and kind of see what I was doing and what I'm planning on to do with it for sure.
Yeah. And were there other influences other than your parents in your life that really helped you to develop your interest in design and 3D design?
For sure. I had a grandfather who lived outside of Amsterdam in a city called Amersfoort, and he had a garage at home, and he was a specialist for a Dutch car company called Duff. They made cars back in the 50s and stuff. So they are now doing like these semi trucks and stuff. So he had like a bunch. He had like always cars in the garage just to work on for other people. So I was like 12 years old, and instead of being in the house when I was visiting them, he was just always just dragging me into the garage, and I fixed my mom's brake system, and I was like 12. So he would check it up, of course, to see if it was safe and stuff. So, but I had to replace like the brake pads and the brake disc and stuff like that, and that was just always like fascinating to me. So when I got a little bit older and my designs kind of started to mature, and it wasn't just design, but I also would get into like mechanical engineering stuff. I would always have somebody to showcase it through and kind of get feedback from somebody that knows what they're talking about. So he would just come with crazy stories. I'd make like a very expensive design for a V6 motor for like a Formula One type deal, and I was showcasing him like the exhaust system for it. And I know it's getting a little bit maybe too technical, but it is with these exhaust systems, I can do like aerodynamic analysis where you can see how fast exhaust waves will kind of come out of that exhaust pipe. And that was like an optimized way that I designed it. And he was telling me like I did the same thing with my bare hands, just welding these pipes and stuff. So it was just fun that we could compare kind of these experiences he had with doing it in the real world, and then kind of showcasing me the same thing, but then on my computer design. So I always had these people around me that was just always with either electronics or mechanical engineering, or just being just always working on something. So that was always around me for sure.
Right. And did you go to college? So you finished high school, but did you
hmm
ever go to college?
I tried a couple of times even. I think I'm like a three-time college dropout at this point, but yeah. It was the first time out of high school. I went to Rotterdam actually, but it was in the south of Rotterdam. So that was like a 2 hour, 30-minute commute every day to go there, and then also the same time to come back home again. And at that time, my parents were in a divorce and stuff, so it was a little bit of a edgy period in my life where I didn't really sleep a lot as well. So it didn't really work out that I didn't really have the power to maintain that study. So but that was a very much that was what I wanted to do, because at that time that engineering route was just all I was thinking about, and I was learning so much at that school because it was just purely focused on the stuff that I was in love with already. So I did take a lot from that. I never sold the books that I bought when I went to that school. I still have them. So I kind of keep all of that stuff around me. So that was the first time. The second time I went here in Amsterdam to engineering design innovation. And at that time, I was already kind of doing a little bit of freelance work here and there. So I needed to do my freelance work in order to pay my school bills, but I wouldn't have time to do my homework and do the freelance. So it was kind of like a chicken egg type of situation that you didn't really know what to do first. So I kind of decided to keep doing my design work for people, and so I dropped out again. And then the third time was product design, and that was also here in Amsterdam. But that was, I think that study is really geared towards people who are just becoming introduced to designing. So you would kind of start off with a project, because that is kind of what creativity is. Like, you have to solve problems, right? So they would give you a problem to solve, and then you would have to draw and sketch out 50 different ways for this problem to become solved, and then diverge those 50 ideas into three that could potentially like work, and then refine those again to finally come up with a different version of it. But at that time, I was like 19 or 20, I think, and I had already been designing for more than 10 years at that time. So I kind of was trained to, quickly come to a solution of how something would work, and then just spend more time at that idea to kind of figure out the way to make it a successful product. And that was just very hard for me to get to grips with, to kind of change my method into their way and kind of unlearn a lot of the things that I already had picked up on my path. So then I was just like, I'm gonna just focus on doing it my way of figuring out, a different way to get to the same point where I would get if I did have a degree. And yeah, I think I'm on my way to kind of do that right now. So yeah.
Great. Tell us, so I would categorize you as a technology user. You're using
Yes.
software programs to create 3D designs. Tell us a bit about the software that you've used over the years, the actual 3D design programs for people who are out there who may want to get into this.
Yeah. So I think that is like, it's a very long list, but I kind of got to that point, and I think that is kind of the blessing of being broke, I think, because you just have to do everything yourself. So I started off doing Google SketchUp, as I said, and then I kind of learned that Google SketchUp had a couple of limitations if you wanted to do mechanical engineering, because you didn't really have the opportunity to make like mechanically moving components that were separate from each other. At least I didn't know how to. So then I jumped over to SolidWorks, and I think that was in 2012. So then I kind of got to grips with that, started to become better at just making different stuff with it, and started to make YouTube videos. So then I would need to be able to do video editing. So I'd learned Adobe Premiere Pro. I also needed to make thumbnails. So I was making logos for people too. And so I was doing Adobe Illustrator work as well, and Photoshop. So after that, I needed to do like the next thing was like that I started to jump into the video game stuff. So I started to also do the Unreal Engine stuff, and you're working with Blender to make rigs for things. And I also do 3D scanning. So then I use 3D Zephyr, which is like a software that could use pictures for photogrammetry and blend all of those together to come up with a cloud or point cloud data file that could then be transferred into an actual readable 3D file. So I would take videos and put them into Premiere Pro and kind of take screenshots off of the individual frames that were in the video, put them into the 3D software, and then kind of mesh them together again to make it happen that I could have like an actual copy of an actual tangible object on my computer. So I could then use that to base to make 3D prints with other aftermarket products attached to that, you know. So that is then also again put that into SolidWorks and combine everything. So it's just a big list of different programs and software systems that you would need to do all of this. And I think for a lot of people, every single one of those is a separate job that you could hire somebody for, you know. But yeah, I had to do everything myself. So that is kind of the blessing in that I've learned everything myself, and I just feel kind of comfortable in saying that I could probably make whatever you need me to. Like, so that is yeah, that is the list of softwares for sure.
And how, like, this is amazing. When you list off all this software, I mean, these are all systems, like you said, that people specialize in. How did
Yeah,
you teach yourself all of these things?
YouTube. That is it. I've always been working with two screens at the same time. So I would always have one where I would be working on that I had the software up and running, and that I would try to make my own versions of the stuff that I was watching on the other screen that people were making tutorials on YouTube for. So in the beginning, when I was started to use the Google SketchUp, my dad kind of printed me out this big folder of just all of these documentations of how this whole software thing works. And I never looked at it because I just always went to the YouTube version. Like it was just a way better way for me to kind of learn it. But if you kind of start to see the pattern that all of these software systems have, it is that it's a workshop. It's just like a garage or something. And then over there in the corner, you have your toolkit with your spanners, and there your drill bits are, you know. So you just know where all of the different tools are that you kind of need to use to make what you're trying to make. And then you just figure out like the best way to kind of put them together to make your work setup. And then if you know what all these tools are capable of, you can now use your imagination to kind of make them shape what you're trying to make. And so that is kind of the way for me. And I kind of learned how to, because I also think that because I started at a very young age, I kind of, my mind was wired the same way that these programs were, I think. So it was easy for me to kind of adapt to these different systems and just make sure that I don't forget what I learned from the previous one.
Right. So there is an iteration process. Again, the technology concepts, they're the same. They stay the
Yeah,
same. The software evolves, but if you understand the foundation, then you can
exactly.
basically evolve with everything. Fantastic. So I'm really curious, what would you say is the mindset and the personal characteristics of a person who is successful in 3D design?
So I think creativity is an important one because basically what creativity means is you need to be able to solve problems. So that is, I think, one of the first ones. The other one is you need to be able to look at something and analyze that there is a problem even, because with everything and anything that you can see, there's probably room for improvement. So you need to be able to look at something and dissect it and kind of find out what the bare essentials are that you would need in order to make this product work, and then kind of find a way to make it your own. So I think that is also a very important thing. Like at a young age, if I got a Nerf gun for Christmas or something, I would take it apart, look at every single component, try to figure out how it works, and put it back together and make it shoot a little bit faster or something, you know. So that is something that is also, I think, very important. You need to be very analytical when looking at just different systems and different opportunities that something could offer you. And then the other one is just a tenacity that you just are capable of sitting behind a computer for maybe 16 or 18 hours in a day sometimes with just, you know, just going at it. That is, I've spent a lot of days like that, and it's not the most healthy thing for sure, but you know, it did get me to a point where I'm capable of now. I'm not 23 yet. I'm almost there, but I think I comfortably can say that I spend more than 15,000 hours doing this stuff. And I think that that is a major advantage because, you know, people at my age only right now get out of college. And that is just that 4 years that they've built up in school. But outside of that, I have like, you know, a 10-year advantage over them. So yeah, I think that is it. Like creativity, like be able to solve problems, be able to look and identify problems, and then having a certain level of tenacity to be able to keep motivated when working on this stuff, because sometimes it can get tiring to solve these problems for sure.
Mhm. I see a young Black man who's doing wonderful things. You come from Amsterdam Southeast. It is a low income, high poverty, high immigrant area where a lot of kids, because I've taught there, I have a company that teaches technology classes to kids. We're
Yeah,
there. The schools, the level of the schools is a lot lower than, for example, the more affluent parts of the city. But you have managed to carve a career despite all of the disadvantages and with the support of your family and the exposure. What kind of advice would you have for young Black kids coming from places like Amsterdam Southeast or some communities in the States or in Canada or whatever, kids of color, kids who the school system doesn't work for them. They're in lousy
yeah.
schools, they don't like what they're learning, they're checked out of school. What's the kind of advice that you can give to them?
I think it's important to make information part of your diet. Knowledge is just, you need to be able to, like, on a daily basis work on sharpening your sword. And even if that opportunity doesn't come from school, you don't have an excuse anymore, because that hour that you spend on social media, you could have spent it like watching documentaries on YouTube and trying to figure out like what it is that you're trying to do. And a lot of kids have a problem these days that they don't really know what they're trying to be in life with their job, or you know, they don't really have something to work towards. And I think that that is something that comes with a lack of exposure in the school systems, because um, you know, for instance, I had a 4-day internship at a Nissan part dealership here in Amsterdam, in the of Amsterdam. And the first day I was working at the warranty section. So that was where broken parts would actually come in, and these mechanics had to dissect them and look at what was possibly going wrong. And then if they had 1,000 of them that was like the same component, that they would know that that is a part that in the grand scheme of the car part, that is basically one of the weakest links, basically. And that was to me very interesting because it was something I could be hands-on with. But then the next day I had to be in the office with the people that were actually doing the paperwork with all of this stuff. And I couldn't sit there for like 3 hours, and I was just going crazy with like the paperwork stuff, because I just know that that is not something that I wanted to do. So I went to the lady that kind of was managing me towards that internship, and I told her, this is something that I know is not going to make me happy in life. So could you please transfer me back over to the guys that do the warranty stuff, and I'll just sit my time out there. So that is kind of like an example for exposing yourself to what it is that your life could be on a professional level, how you could pay your bills, but knowing what you want to go for. And I think that that is something that a lot of people and kids are missing. So expose yourself to more information than what your Instagram timeline is telling you. Like, I go look for something that might find you interesting. I'm looking at great white sharks documentaries all day. I don't know why, but it's just something that interests me a lot. So it's just I think that is something that kind of comes with it. As soon as you start to constantly elevate, you start to exponentially expand. And that is like something, if you're in like a airplane or something and you are at ground level, you can only see the tarmac. If as soon as you start to rise, you start to see the whole area you're in. But then when you're really at the peak, you start to see just like the globe if you're from a satellite, and then everything starts to look at one. And I think information is the same way. If you're at the ground level, you can only see like the current situation you're in. And the higher you get, you kind of see the bigger picture. But if you really get up high, you don't see the bigger picture. You just see that all information is basically coming down to one thing. And that is, I think, what this kind of thing, the process has been for me, that I've been able to learn so much through these watching different documentaries, and that I can learn and take input from everything, that I can now do a lot. I know how nuclear submarines work, for instance, like that is just all of the information becomes one. And the one thing you see is that just problem solving. And if you can do that and kind of focus on, learning and constantly developing this tech, you can do whatever you want. And like me, I'm an example. Just like you, I don't have a school degree, so it's possible.
Mhm.
So that is kind of what I would want to say to kids, is make sure that information kind of becomes part of your diet, and that you just on a daily basis develop yourself to become better at your craft and figure out what that is.
Mhm. Question for you. What about schools? Do you think schools are doing a good job? You've been through the school system. Is it doing a good job of preparing kids for the future and for a future filled with technology?
Um, Again, I think it's a personal situation for everybody, because whatever you're trying to do for your future is different. For me personally, no, I don't think so, because I got most of my information outside of the school systems. So I think what they could do is just on the same level, that exposure that I was talking about, is that they put more of an emphasis on this technology in the schools, because in the future, in like 20 years, everything that's coming with AR and VR, like we're gonna look at a very different world from now. And just because people are using computers and laptops and phones that seem smart, that is not the limit of technology that is out there right now. So I think, for instance, if you would be a parent or like a caregiver or a school, that instead of the kids buying toys for Christmas or something, you would just buy them a 3D printer with a lot of plastic, and they would be able to design their own toys. And how would that turn out if they would find an interest in, developing their own stuff and kind of holding it in their hand, what they just had, computed a couple hours ago? Then that is like a trigger that can really like set in a motion of like inspiration to kind of figure out a way to turn that into your business. And I think that is something that I found myself to be like very fun and stuff. So I've been able to hold stuff that I 3D printed, that I designed, that wasn't there like yesterday, so it was I think those realizations kind of really could set into like an inspiration in motion that could trigger kids to do more in that direction, because we would need them for sure.
Perfect. My last question for you. Now, this is really important. So parents, say they got a kid that's like crazy about drawing and has started to do some kind of sketching online. What specific actions can they take to really feed this passion and be as specific as possible? What kind of programs would you suggest that you expose kids to if they want to become 3D designers?
So everything I'm gonna name now is completely free. So you can download it on any computer, and it doesn't take a lot of investment. I would recommend upgrading a computer if you could, but I would start off with Blender. And Blender is a 3D sculpting like design software that is 1,000% free, and you can basically make whatever you please in it. It also has some things that you could make like mechanically operating things, and it was also 3D printable with the files and all of that. So I think that's a good base to start off with. I think also that a lot of kids these days have interest in video games, and I think that if you start to use Blender and then you probably convert it over to Unreal Engine, then you could just within like the shortest period of time start making things that look like professional video games these days by yourself. So I think that that is something that a lot of kids would probably be interested in. And I think that if you start to see whatever is possible in this world, then more opportunities would kind of open up. So then if you would be interested in movies, you could make your own short films by yourself. If you would be interested in the games or music videos, you could start making whatever you want to. So I think that that would be a good way to kind of start, that you would have Blender as like your design development tool. And then also you put the Unreal Engine to kind of make it into a design world that you could tell your story through. And I also think like with 3D printing, I think with the toys that I just said, I think that that could potentially even be a money saver. 3D printers these days are getting cheaper and cheaper by the day. I think you could get like a small printer that could print like 25 by 20 by 30 centimeters or something that would already be good for certain toys that you could print. I think that would be like 185 euros or something, and then it is like 20 euros for a kilo of plastic, and you could print out like I don't know. I think maybe 7 like Iron Mans that are 20 centimeters or something, with a kilo of plastic. So that could then already be like a business that people could set up if you would just have a printer and then make your own toys and maybe sell them to kids in school. You never know what you can do with it. So I think that is like those are like small things that don't take a lot of money to start up with. That if you just don't buy a pair of designer shoes or something that you could do already. And yeah, I think that is like one of the first steps that I'm definitely also taking myself right now. So yeah, I think that that would be one of the advice that I would give.
Great. Shaquille, this has been an amazing interview. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time. Thank you for sharing your story and inspiring the caregivers, the adults and kids' lives. Just really the message is that, yes, school is important, but there's other ways to learn. And you're an example
For
of
sure.
someone who's hands-on and who's tangible and who's learned. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing where your career takes you. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It has been fun.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.